Hello everybody, I am Jared Ross, a Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another video where I answer your DNA and genealogy questions. As always, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer in one of these videos, be sure to go to my subreddit r/GenieVlogger and post your questions there. There is a long list of questions that I still need to answer, some dating back almost a year, but I do still answer more recently posted questions if there's something that I feel would be really good to answer in a video. But let's jump into it. Brazilian Ancestry DNA results. Last November, I got the MyHeritage Ancestry DNA kit and got a month to try their family tree tools. I'm hella Brazilian. I was able to identify all my great-great-grandfathers and grandmothers, I'm assuming he's saying, and they were all born in northeastern Brazil. Two lines, one paternal and one maternal, go back independently to the 1500s and the first Portuguese settlers in Brazil. The closest non-Brazilian that I could find is a paternal great-great-great-grandparent that was born in France in the early 1830s. Couldn't trace his line beyond his father, who was also born in France. I always suspected that one of my paternal lines has some kind of Jewish ancestry, but that is pure speculation on my part based on their surnames that are very similar to those adopted by fleeing Jews who adopted Christianism when they got to Brazil, kind of like Pereira, Oliveira, and Menguera. One of my paternal grandmother lines traces back to the early 1700s Italy. On my maternal grandfather line, I couldn't go beyond the great-great-grandfather's grandmothers. According to family lore and their surname etymology, they are probably of Portuguese origin, but there are some dark-skinned among them, so we always suspected that they are mixed with some African, but I couldn't confirm. In my mother's maternal grandfather line, I was able to find a lot of direct ancestors that came from Portugal, with the closest being a great-great-great-great-grandfather of hers that was born around 1784 and came to Brazil in the early 1800s. Found some family lore about marriages with indigenous women in this line, but it's hard to confirm. So I was expecting a lot of Iberian with some Native American, African, French, Italian, and a Jewish mixed in. Was quite surprised with the amount of African that appeared on that MyHeritage results, but since it's mostly North African, I suspect that it's results of the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. There's also a lot of Balkan that I imagine is close related to the Ashkenazi Jewish that also appeared. Did not expect Scandinavian at all, but there are some light-haired and blue-eyed people in the family, including my younger sister. There's too much Mesoamerican and Andean. I expected that most of my Native American DNA to be indigenous Amazonian. Also no French or Italian, all feels weird. And then they included a bunch of screenshots. So looking at the first one, this is MyHeritage. 49.5% Iberian, and they have communities of Portugal #1, Brazil, Portugal, the Faroe Islands, and then Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, and Minas Gerais. 10.1% Balkan, 6.9% Scandinavian, 4.1% Ashkenazi Jewish, 0.8% English, 16.3% North African, 3.8% Nigerian, 1.8% Kenyan, 5.1% Mesoamerican and Andean, 1.6% Indigenous Amazonian. And then down here, that's family tree DNA, I'm pretty sure. Yep, my FTDNA. 73% Iberian, 3% Scandinavian, 2% Central Europe, 4% Magyar, less than 2% Ashkenazi Jewish, 4% Sephardic Jewish, less than 2% Anatolia, Armenian, Mesopotamia, North Africa, 4% Americas, 3%, 1%, less than 1%, and then 3% African. Genome link, which, yeah, okay. Other European, Northwest, yeah, I'm not even going to really pay attention to that. Living DNA, 70.9% Europe, 20.5% Africa, 8.6% Native Americas. So to go through the things that they said, was quite surprised with the amount of African that appeared on the MyHeritage results, but since it's mostly North African, they suspect it's connected to the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. So they are somewhat correct that they can probably correlate that North African, or at least a good amount of it, to the Iberian because of the Umayyad Caliphate. I probably said that incorrectly. There's also the possibility that with their Nigerian and Kenyan, that maybe they have a mixture of different African ancestry, and while some of that North African may correlate to, you know, the different Muslim conquests going to Iberia and then back through once Iberia's taken back over by the Catholics. They mentioned having possible African ancestry through certain sides. They're getting it showing up in their DNA at a decent amount, 3.8%, 1.8% here from MyHeritage. So it's very possible that the North African could correlate to that somewhat. But then the next thing they said here, there's also a lot of Balkan that I imagine is closely related to Ashkenazi Jewish. And to be completely honest, I have never noticed in all of my experience any sort of serious correlation between Balkan readings and Ashkenazi Jewish. Now, there certainly are some correlations between the Balkans and Ashkenazi Jews, because there were many Ashkenazi Jews who ended up in areas of the Balkans, but I find more often than not with people who are Ashkenazi Jewish, if they do get readings that aren't Ashkenazi Jewish on MyHeritage, it's usually going to be stuff that's like Eastern European. The Balkans certainly could be part of the Ashkenazi Jewish, but I really, really doubt, especially like with your MyHeritage reading of 10.1% versus 4.1%. But with MyHeritage, they are known to have readings that aren't as correct, at least from what people know from their family trees, if they have a very well built out family tree. And especially when it comes to the Jewish readings, myself coming from Ashkenazi Jewish and Sephardic Jewish ancestry, there is a question in the results of how accurate they are, especially in the fact that MyHeritage doesn't release a white paper. Then this did not expect Scandinavian at all, but there are some light-haired and blue-eyed people in the family, including my younger sister. When it comes to this kind of stuff, I personally kind of hate it when people say, you know, oh yeah, we didn't think we had this, but I guess there are people with light skin here, this kind of look here, and like, that can correlate with your ancestry, but it doesn't always necessarily. I know that kind of sounds off in some ways, but like, you know, a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, I had relatives that had very dark olive skin, so they must have been this ancestry. And it's like, well, there's tons of different ancestries they might have been that had dark olive skin. So it's just, you know, blue eyes isn't just Scandinavian. It's all over the place. Yeah, the Scandinavian, let's see, what is it in the other ones? You got 3% here, and then in MyHeritage it was 6.9%, and then Genome Link really is pointless. And then Living DNA didn't break down anything beyond the continent, which sounds like you did the free, yeah, the Ancestry taster. They basically don't give you anything. It's their free thing. But I would say that the Scandinavian does stand out here a pretty good bit, because usually when we see Scandinavian results coming in for people where they didn't know about it, they have this big hodgepodge of Northwestern European, whereas for you, the only other Northwestern European you're really getting is English. So that Scandinavian is coming up in your MyHeritage, and it's coming up in Family Tree DNA. Family Tree DNA is also getting Central Europe, which MyHeritage isn't getting, but you could lump that into the Balkan or Scandinavian technically. Scandinavian just because, you know, the population migrations and all of that. But then that also probably is accounted for in these FTDNA readings as this Eastern European Magyar. And then as for your last statement here, there's too much Mesoamerican and Andean. I expected that most of my Native American DNA to be indigenous Amazonian. Also no French or Italian, all feel weird. The French and Italian thing, that could be part of the English and Scandinavian, or, you know, your Central European Scandinavian. For one, it sounds like you're expecting very, very specific results. But in terms of the Native American, especially like looking down here, you get a good mix of, you know, Amerindian, Central and South American, Andes and Caribbean, Amazon. And then you get the indigenous Amazonian and Mesoamerican and Andean. And so there is a mixture, and I don't really know the Brazil history in terms of the indigenous peoples that well. Honestly, I don't know indigenous peoples' history of Americas that well personally. Just something I've never really studied that in depth, and it's not something that I've ever had a family tree to build or anything like that. So I've never had good experience with anything like that. But knowing how difficult it is in deciphering DNA and all of this different stuff with the population groups and all of that, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a difficulty of being able to see the genetic groups so specifically. So there may be a lot of overlap genetically between Mesoamerican and Andean and indigenous Amazonian. If you really wanted to dive deep and figure out how accurate the Native American readings are, and as to whether or not there is a big difficulty in deciphering them apart from each other, you'd need to look at the white papers and look at their recall and precision numbers. MyHeritage does not have a white paper they release. Family Tree DNA used to release white papers, but I think in the most recent ones, I haven't seen any white papers released. So maybe they are out there. If anyone knows, comment down below. But I think right here, you're just expecting it to be too exact with everything, especially with a lot of the other stuff you said, expecting very specific everything. And I think you're just, it's another case of, you got to think a lot more broadly. And unfortunately, when you go down to the living DNA and the fact they just break it up, Europe, Africa, Native Americas, they're probably doing it the best because they're just looking continentally and not at this whole, trying to really break it up regionally. But let's jump into the next question because I think I spent too much time on this one. My DNA results from 4 companies compared, as well as my ancestry results compared to my father's. So we have a whole lot. So starting out, the 4 comparisons. So we have Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA. So here we have Eastern Europe and Russia with Ancestry, and they have a whole bunch of different communities that are coming up. Then we have 18% Scotland, 16% Baltic, 13% Ireland, 2% England, Northwestern Europe, 2% Norway, 1% European Jewish. For 23andMe, we have 63.5% Eastern European with a whole bunch of different communities coming up. And that's somewhat correlated to the 48% here. Although I'm guessing that a lot of the Baltics that's coming up in Ancestry is probably being lumped in with the Eastern European. Then we have Northwestern European, 32.9%. And that's broken down British and Irish 29.6, French and German 1.5, and then a broadly Northwestern at 1.8. So that makes sense because if we look over here, we have 18% Scotland, then we have 13% Ireland, so that's 31% right there, plus the 2% England and Northwest Europe and 2% Norway. That's what, 30-something percent, so pretty close. And then we have Southern European over here for 23andMe coming up at 2.3, split up into Greek and Balkan at 1.3 and Italian at 1. And that's probably lumped in the different things in the Baltics and possibly in some of this England, Northwestern, whatever. We are also getting this 0.5% Ashkenazi Jewish, so that's kind of correlating with this 1%, as well as the 0.6% broadly European, which could really go anywhere. And then you have 0.2% Coptic Egyptian, although that is a serious trace result, so very, very questionable. Jumping over to MyHeritage, Eastern European, 72.5%. Once again, lots and lots of communities. So I'm guessing that if you trace out your family tree, that's probably what you're able to find is a whole lot of Eastern European. And I do know that, in here you're getting Poland, Slovakia, Poland, a lot of that. Ukrainian to Eastern Europe. From what we can see, you have Poland and Ukraine as your top here in 23andMe, and then we're getting that Poland and all of that up here, so, very, very connected. Then we have 7.7% Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, 6.4% Scandinavian, 4.9% Finnish, all of those really being that Northwestern European. We also get 3.7% Baltic, 3% Italian here for MyHeritage, and then 1.8% English. So the correlation with that Southern European between 23andMe and MyHeritage, that's the only thing that really isn't showing up in Ancestry, but it very well could just be lumped in with some of that East or in that Northwestern European as part of the England. Unless there might be, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of percentages down here that we might not be seeing, but I'm not sure, might be. And then going over to Family Tree DNA, Eastern European, we have 24% West Slavic, 20% East Slavic, 7% Magyar, which is then coming up to 51% for the total Eastern European. So not quite the same as the others, but they are giving that Baltic reading here of 9%. So it's very possible that a good amount of that Baltic here is coming into the Eastern European because I'm guessing that's what happened with Ancestry. A lot of that Baltic is going into the Eastern European and Russian in both MyHeritage and 23andMe. Then we have the Western Europe, so Northwestern Europe really, Ireland 25%, Scandinavia 12%, so 30-ish% again, and then Greece, Balkans less than 3%, and then Middle East, North Africa less than 1%, with less than 1% Southern Caucasus. Now they have a photo of them compared to their father, so here we have that comparison, and then I'm guessing CS is the father. So you have a whole lot of Eastern European and Russian. Your father only has 12%. So what it sounds like to me is that you're getting a whole lot of that Eastern European from your mom's side. Then Scotland, you have 18%. Your dad has 31%. So you're probably getting most of that from him. Ireland, 13%. Your father, 28%. Once again, you're probably getting most of that from him. Then England and Northwestern Europe, 2%. Your father, 12%. Probably getting most of that from him. And then Baltics, you have 16%. Your dad has none. Norway, 2%. Your dad has none. European Jewish, 1%. Your dad has none. Then your dad has Germanic Europe. Your dad has Sweden and Denmark, Wales and the Balkans, and you have none of that. Ancestry says I got no Balkan, Swedish, or German from him, but then the other test picks some of those up. My mom's side is Eastern European, Baltic with some Ashkenazi, and Norwegian. So yeah, it all makes sense. Honestly, the reason why Ancestry is probably not picking the other ones up, like your Sweden, Denmark, or Wales, which technically were in some of the others, it also comes down to how they're defining it. So like with one of the companies going back, looking at Wales, if we look at Wales with the different companies, with MyHeritage, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh are all lumped in together. But then we don't have any Welsh on the other ones because they're not including in it. Then for Scandinavian, we have Scandinavian, But then over here, we don't have any Scandinavian. A lot of that Scandinavian is probably getting lumped up in the French and German, probably in the broadly Northwestern European, and then probably in some of the British and Irish. And then over here, from Ancestry, no Scandinavian again. In fact, we have Norway, England and Northwestern Europe, Ireland, Scotland. So a lot of it also is coming down to how they are defining things. So going back to the comparison, it certainly makes sense that you might not get some of these readings in Ancestry, even if your dad did, just because of, one, the differences in how they're being read across the different companies. So the fact that you may get small percentages of this or decent percentages of this in other companies may just be a difference of how it's being read. And then the other thing too is just that, you're not going to inherit all the DNA from your dad. You only get 50% of your DNA from him. And so there's a whole 50% of DNA that he has that you're just not going to get. And in some cases like this Germanic Europe, he's got 8% and you got 0. Where technically if recombination was perfect, you would have 4% because you'd get exactly half. But you don't always get exactly half. Sad meme. You're in a situation where finding relatives is the best or only way to learn about your family history. You take a DNA test. Wait, you only get one close DNA match. They haven't been active for months, years. You sent a message, but it's been weeks, months. You can't find their username in any social media. You get a response. The person messaging says the original user has died. That is a very, very, very sad, sad meme. That would be quite unfortunate, especially the only DNA match. Granted, if you do have someone responding to you at the very least, they could be like, oh, well, the person's died, but here's their obituary and here's the information about them, so you could at least have something to start building your tree. But yeah, that'd be very unfortunate. Is this a close DNA match? I recently did Ancestry and came up with 3 matches at over 200 centimorgans. One, 299 centimorgans over 10 segments. The second at 242 centimorgans over 9 segments. And the third, 202 centimorgans over 7 segments. All of these people match each other and have a common ancestor according to their tree. How do I determine where I fit into that tree? It appears to be on the paternal side. I know absolutely nothing and no way to find out otherwise. So to start, yes, these are very good DNA matches. This is the type of thing that if I were to look at a DNA test and evaluate it to determine how likely are we going to be able to solve this case. So if I have a new adoptee that I'm helping to find, their biological family, and these are the top matches, I would say we have a very likely chance of solving this. But even though it is very likely, there is still a chance it may not be solved. And even if it is solved, it may still take a while. But this gives us good footing to get a great start. So the fact that you have these 3 matches, even if they weren't related to each other, would be amazing. But then figuring out that they are related to each other and having a common ancestor, which the way you say that, it sounds like you know the name of the common ancestor, which if that's the case, I'm assuming you have a tree of theirs built out where you know how each one of them is related. And that puts you at a really good advantage because then you can use the what are the odds tool, also known as the Watto tool. And the way that works is you build out a family tree using this information. So you build out their tree on Watto. It's just a simple tree that you build. You don't need a whole lot of info. You put each person in their place in their tree, put in the amount of centimorgans they're matching, and then you click suggest hypothesis. Then what it does is it suggests all the possible hypotheses of where you may fit into that family tree. And it will give different scores on which hypotheses are more likely. And I highly suggest reading a lot of different articles and guides. And I have videos about how to use what are the odds. So highly recommend checking it out. Probably link one of them in the, link up here, whatever. But this is an amazing start. And then the fact that you say here that you know absolutely nothing and no way to find out otherwise says to me that you're probably dealing with an unknown parentage situation. Basically, you either don't know who your parents are, or you don't know a big chunk of your family, or there's something else going on where there's a lot of question marks. But even being in that position with your research, this is a great start, great matches. The fact that you have that common ancestor, and now you can take it to the what are the odds tool. And even more, once you build out that what are the odds tool and you have a good idea, you can also start looking for matches that are shared matches with these three matches. Because any matches that you share with these three matches, the basic idea is that you all then are coming from the same family, and that more distant match is going to be coming from one of the more distantly related ancestors. So if you can figure out what ancestor that distantly related match is matching to these three, then that can tell you more specifically where in their family tree you're going to match as well. And it's been 9 months since you've posted this, so hopefully you've figured this information out, because I know it takes me a long time to get to these questions. I should note to people, I'm trying to answer every single question, which is why there's such a long queue, because I want people to feel like even if they're going to post their question, it's not going to be a waste of their time. It will be eventually answered. Granted, this is taking me way longer than I thought, but it also goes to show how many questions I constantly get, because even with this Reddit setup where I'm helping people and answering questions, I still get emails every single day on my Facebook, on Instagram, just my regular email, through Twitter, just all sorts of messages all the time of people being like, hey, can you personally help me out and tell me all about this stuff? Fortunately, that stuff's not that easy, and that's why I do these videos. So trying to answer all the questions this way. So let's jump into the next one. Are there any good online genealogy courses? I love this question. Straight to the point, no fluff. Honestly, this is one that's a little difficult for me to answer because I haven't done too many online genealogy courses. I do believe that a lot of the genealogy institutes, so things like GRIP, the Genealogical Research Institute of Pittsburgh, or SLIG, the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy, there's a few other ones out there as well. Those are usually the top tier when it comes to your genealogy courses. In the recent years, because of the whole COVID thing, I think they did online courses through GRIP and SLIG. I don't know if they will continue doing that, but I would suggest checking them out to see if they will, because I would think that some of them would. I mean, after COVID, pretty much everyone's realized how easy it is to do a lot of this kind of stuff online, and I think they'd want to take advantage of that. But if that's not available, one that I would suggest that I have gone through, which is a multi-week course, and that's through the University of Strathclyde, which is in Scotland, I believe. It is free to do, but there's also a paid version if you want a certificate. But then beyond that, I can't think of any like official courses that I would really recommend. There's a whole lot of stuff available video-wise. So like you do have all of the catalog of Roots Tech, which I think someone mentioned in here. You do also have all of the stuff on YouTube. I have a bunch of tutorial videos. You have all sorts of amazing channels like Family History Fanatics, Genealogy TV, Amy Johnson Crow's channel, Lisa Louise Cook's channel, and then all these smaller channels that do all sorts of really cool work, some that do very specific genealogical focuses. And funny enough, within the past year, I did a top 5 video of the best up and coming YouTube genealogy channels, which you can check out right here. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I'm Jarrett Ross, a Genie Vlogger. See you in my next one.